All right. Hello and welcome to the Agile Roundtable. I'm Bradley, the moderator, and I'm here with our amazing panelists, Michaela Whitenall, Courtney Radoke, and Samantha Wexstein. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
So, first of all, could you please introduce yourself, starting with Courtney?
So hi, I'm Courtney Radike. I'm an agent at the Bel Castro agency. I represent YA and adult fiction, mostly focusing on science fiction, fantasy, horror, and contemporary. And I'm based in Washington State on the West Coast.
Thank you. Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Wexstein. I'm an agent at the Thompson Literary Agency, which I've been at since 2019. Before that, I was at Writer's House. I represent a wide range of genres from picture books all the way up through YA, as well as commercial adult fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, women's fiction, romance, historical fiction.
All right. And Michaela?
Hi there. I'm Michaela Watnell. I'm with the agency Distill, Godrich, and Barrett. My background is in school and library marketing. So as I'm building my list, I'm focusing a lot on children's literature, picture books through young adult, as well as graphic novels, which I love. And then in the adult space, I'm looking primarily for genre fiction, speculative fiction, especially that which centers characters that are, usually underrepresented.
All right. So now let's go with the question. First of all, on which main aspect do you evaluate our query? Samantha?
Well, I look at the concept. I look at if I think it's marketable. I look at the writing style in the letter. Is it awkward? Does it flow? And does the query actually convey the full arc of the story? Is the author the right person to tell that story? So it's a number of different things, but it's basically am I connecting with the concept above all else? Because if I'm going to take it on, I have to read this manuscript 5 times in a row, be its biggest champion. So yeah, that's what I look for.
Okay. Michaela?
I mean, I have to agree with everything that Samantha just said. Absolutely. I'm looking for, does the query pique my interest in some way? Would it be a good fit for me based on the category? Does this align with the things that I represent? Am I intrigued by the general premise? Do I understand the general premise? Is it clear to me what type of story this is, what journey we're about to go on? I always look to know, what character or characters we're going to be along for the ride for. Sometimes I'll see queries where it's so focused on the world or the premise that I don't actually know who I'm going to be along with as I go through this world and this story. So that's something that I love to see, get a hint about, what arc the character is going to be on. And I don't think that comps are necessary, but I do think when they're there and when they're appropriate and, there's something that communicates something about the story or where it fits in the market, I think that can be a real asset as well.
All right. Courtney?
Yeah, echoing everything Samantha and Michaela said, in terms of what the story is actually about, I'm definitely always looking for if the conflict is clear and if the goals of the main character are clear. And the consequences if those goals aren't met. Those are the big 3 things that I really want to see from the arc of the journey. And to just adding on metadata stuff like word count and like Michaela said, comparison titles, because word count can be something that you can get rejected for right off the bat if it's way too high or way too low. So definitely making sure that you're within range there is a good idea.
All right. What are the red flags in queries, especially in the first page? Michaela?
I think looking at the query, just the one thing that I think about is, is it clear why this person queried me. I think what my agency is pretty clear on our website and various other places, like what categories we represent. So if I get something that very much doesn't match my list or what I'm looking for, then usually I know pretty quickly that that's not going to be a fit. You know, like I'm not the person for a political thriller. And then looking at the pages, I think that something I can find a lot is maybe we start, you know, there's that piece of advice, you know, start in the middle of the action. And sometimes I think that gets taken too far and we get dropped into the action and I don't know where we are or who we're with or why what's going on is important. So looking at the first few pages, I always like to feel grounded in the story and feel like I understand the basics of what's going on so that I can immediately invest in our character and their goal from page one.
All right. Courtney?
Yeah, so a couple of the things that are really big red flags for me are being super vague on details of the plot in your query. There's a fine line between giving too much detail and not enough detail. And if there's nothing unique that I can pull from your query, that's usually an issue. Also, if you're focusing more on what the themes are of your book than what the actual story is, that's usually not telling me much about what the actual story is. And when you're talking about comparison titles, if you're only using really big ones or really old ones, that's usually telling me that you're not paying attention to what the market is like right now, or telling me you have no comparison titles because your book is unlike any other that has been written before. You know, not having comparison titles in itself isn't bad, but for that reason, if you say it's for that reason, is usually a red flag. And as for pages, using super generic openers like starting with the weather or waking up or sparring if you're in like fantasy is usually not a huge red flag, but kind of one for me. If you're info dumping with your character or your world, or if you're having the character speak like directly to the reader right away, especially for like YA and adult. For younger, I'm not positive, but for my age categories, that's usually a red flag. So yeah, those are the big ones for me.
All right, Samantha?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. Touching a little bit on what Michaela was talking about, one of the biggest red flags for me is when the opening pages lack emotional depth. You know, we want to focus on the character in both the query and in the opening pages. And if I don't understand what is motivating your character and how they feel about the world around them, then I'm not going to connect with either your query or your pages. In terms of query red flags, this is like your cover letter in a professional sense. You're basically applying for a job. So you should make sure to not be pompous, not be unprofessional in any way. Make sure to follow the guidelines and take our interests into account. And other things that always turn me off are really confusing world building in both the letter and the pages. Like if you're spending all this time dropping in terms without explaining them or not really giving us a sense of why what's in the world is important to your character, then I'm really turned off right away.
All right. What do you wish writers knew before querying? Samantha?
I wish that writers knew how long it actually takes us to review each query, because, you know, we have a lot going on in our days, especially because we have a responsibility first and foremost to our current clients. We have to read their manuscripts, we have to negotiate their contracts, we have to answer their questions. So queries are often really secondary to that. And it, you know, I really do like to take my time, go through the query, go through the pages and make a decision. And so I appreciate when authors are patient. We also get a lot. I get like 400 to 500 queries a month, and I can really only review like 300. So that's sort of what we're working with and why agents are often closing. And so, you know, that's why it's taking so long.
All right. Courtney?
So yeah, I have quite a few things. But So just a few things like in terms of like emotions and like anxieties when it comes to querying. If you find a typo 2 seconds after you send a query, don't panic. Even if it's the agent's name, I promise you, we're not going to hold it against you. Everybody has typos. It's not a big deal. I'd also suggest making an email account that's separate from your normal email account that's like specific for querying. So you're not jumping at your phone every single time you get a notification. It's going to help your anxiety a lot to have that separate account that you check like at specific times so that you're not constantly being like, what if this is the email that gets me an offer? Also, just like being realistic about each book as you're querying. If the book you're querying doesn't get you an agent, that does not mean that it's a bad book. And if the one you are querying does get you an agent, that doesn't mean it's automatically going to sell. There are a lot of different, aspects that come into whether or not a book gets an agent or a book makes that sale. And yeah, there's just a lot of that to it. You're also going to have a lot of writer friends who get deals and agents before you do, and that's okay. And just because they're a little bit further along in their journey or because their journey went a little bit faster doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong or that your stuff isn't as good as theirs. Find your writer friends that you can vent to, but I promise you, like, you're doing okay. It'll be okay.
Okay. Michaela?
Totally agree with what's been said. And I think most of my thoughts are similar to Samantha's. I just keep in mind that agents have a lot going on and we do want to spend time with each query and like really give it its moment. Yeah, we appreciate your patience. And if an agent's taking a little while to get back to you, that's not necessarily a negative reflection on you or on the query. It just means that that agent has a lot on their plate and they're trying to wait until they have the time to really give your work the attention that it deserves. And at least personally, if I'm not being super speedy, I probably feel bad about it. So, just keep that in mind. I really like it. I want to be as, fast as possible. So it's not that I'm delaying because I want to make you wait. It's just because there's just not enough time in the day sometimes. And then one other thing that I think we've sort of touched on other questions, but something that I think it's great for writers to keep in mind before querying is that it's really important to be familiar with what other books are being published right now in the category that you're trying to publish into, and being aware of what books you want your book to be in conversation with. Like when you think about the bookstore bookshelf, where do you see your book shelved? What book is it next to? How does it, talk to the other books that have come before it, but also contribute something new? And I think if you can communicate a little bit of that in your query, that's always great.
Okay. Do you check a writer's social media before contacting them? What are some red flags? Courtney?
So yes, I always check authors' social media accounts. Usually I'll check them just casually, like if I send a request just because I'm curious about who you are, but definitely more thoroughly like before I offer. I don't really care how big your account is. I do fiction, so platform's not really going to be, a factor in whether or not I offer. But I do want to see if you're being bigoted or bullying people on social media. Those are really the only two big things for me that are going to make me get turned off from you as an author.
Okay. Michaela?
Absolutely what Courtney said. I'm really not concerned about what your social media presence looks like or doesn't look like, as long as, if you're not being hateful or using it to be hateful. And I think that some people put a lot of pressure on themselves to have some kind of platform, but especially in fiction, that's going to come down the line. And, if you're not a big social media person right now, maybe when you get a book deal, the publisher might help you or your agent might help you to, have some tips about how to develop that. But don't freak out. I'm like not a social media person. I'm on there when I have to be, but it's not my forte. It's not something I love to do. So I understand that like stress of, oh gosh, like I need to be presenting myself in this certain way, and don't worry about it. Focus on the writing, and that part will come.
Okay. Samantha?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I absolutely Google everyone. I am looking at your Twitter, your Instagram, your website. For me, it's not important that you have a big web presence at all, especially if you're a debut. But it is a red flag when you have nothing. And what I recommend is you get a website. Weebly is free, completely free. You can get an author website, just, you can have a brief about you section, a way to contact you. And then when you do eventually find some success, that's a place where your fans can go to learn more about you. You can put buy links up to your books. It's just good to drive people towards your website. But yeah, I don't think it's important for you to be good at social media at all.
All right. What are some trends that are on the way out, yet you still see frequently in your slush pile? Michaela?
I don't know that there are any real trends that I immediately think to comment on, but the one that I see a lot, and it's a really hard sell, is pandemic fiction. I feel like I see so many queries that are about the pandemic, or about, a picture book explaining the pandemic, or about a kid during the pandemic. And that's just really hard right now. I mean, I think agents find that difficult, both like emotionally to engage with, but then also editors do as well. And readers, I think at this point too, are looking more for escapism rather than direct engagement in the story. So I think there's room for one or two, but at this point, when I see a project like that in my inbox, I don't usually feel confident that I would, know how to work with it, or even have the desire to engage with the pandemic on that level right now. Personally, I think that is going to be a really interesting space, maybe in a couple of years when we have a little bit of distance. But right now, I do think that's a really tricky trend.
Okay. Samantha?
Yeah, that's a good point. For me, the trends that I see a lot, because I do a lot of epic fantasy, I get a lot of medieval based fantasy, which I'm really not looking for. That has been really well tread. And I'm looking for something that is not inspired by European history. So anything new or really unique, or any cultures that haven't been done as much before, that is more what I'm looking for. And like Arthurian myths really feel very dead to me. I get a lot of them, but I don't really want to read that material over and over again.
Okay. Courtney?
So like Samantha, I have a lot of sci-fi and fantasy queries that come in. And I do want to preface this with a caveat that BIPOC and like queer and other marginalized stories do still need to be done in these tropes. So if you do have, stories with BIPOC or queer characters, like that's a little bit different. But Chosen One and like Lost Prince / Princess queries, I see so much. And that's one that, because it's been done so much, I wouldn't really know how to place it in a unique way to make it stand out, like in an editor's inbox or on the market.
All right. What question should a writer ask when the call happens? Samantha?
You should ask what the agent's communication style is and how long they typically take to get back to you, either just to answer a question or to give you notes. Some agents will get you notes within a couple weeks, some will take a couple months. So that's really something that can help ease anxieties and help with the agent relationship just going into it. You should ask them what happens if your first book doesn't sell. That happens all the time. And you really want to find an agent who's going to manage you for your whole career and not just drop you at the first sign of failure. And does the agent rep all the genres that you're planning to write in? Some authors will start off in middle grade and move to YA, or even, I have a client who writes YA fantasy, but she's getting a master's in psychology. And so she was talking to me about writing a psychology book one day. So you really want to make sure that your agent is going to help you plan your career and be with you every step of the way. And lastly, I know this is a long answer. I think you want to ask how transparent they're going to be. Like, are they going to share submission lists with you? Are they going to send you every rejection? Are you going to be able to have the input on the pitch letter? Just to, I mean, and there's no wrong answer or right answer, but figure out their style and if that meets your needs.
Okay, thank you. Courtney?
Yeah, so obviously, first of all, you should ask any and every question that you have on the call because, you know, the ball is now in your court and you're the one that has the power to choose whether or not you're going to work with this agent. And it's important that you ask any question that you have, like, don't feel bad asking a lot of questions, like at all. One of the big ones for me is asking what the editorial vision that the agent has for the book is. Some agents are a lot more editorial than others, and it's okay if they're not editorial, if that's what you want. It all depends on what you're looking for in an agent. And going with what Samantha was saying about communication, I think it's also important to ask what kind of like communications they prefer to use. So like for me, I have a lot of phone anxiety and social anxiety. So like I prefer to communicate with my authors via email and messaging. But I'm also perfectly fine with getting on video or phone calls if that's what they prefer. So just making sure that whatever you're comfortable with, the agent is okay with also communicating in that form with. Also, I think it's important to ask, you know, if you guys were to part ways in the future, like what that process would look like. Because, you know, as much as you want that first agent to be your end all be all and to be the perfect agent, it's not always the case. And, you know, they could be a perfectly good agent, you could be a perfectly good client, but sometimes, you know, the match just isn't right. And that's okay. And it's important to ask like what that would look like and make sure that that would be an amicable process and a relatively easy process. Also, I like when authors ask me what made me decide to be an agent. You know, I feel like that's a really nice question to ask. And so far from my clients, they've all told me that they like the answer that they hear a lot of the time. And also asking if you can speak with current clients is a big one because they're going to be able to tell you more accurately from the author's perspective what their experience has been like. And, you know, I can tell you all day like what I think my communication style is like and, you know, what I'm like to work with. And hopefully that reflects accurately with my clients. But it's usually a good idea to hear from them in particular to hear whether or not they've had a good experience. And that can be really telling.
All right. Michaela?
I think you guys have covered it pretty well. I think, yeah, my main responses are going to be, yeah, work style, communication style to make sure you guys align, the revisions that they see necessary for the project to make sure that you align on that. And then I want to give a quick plug. My colleague Jim McCarthy has his pinned tweet is a list of questions that he recommends that you ask. So that's a great resource starting out if you're creating your own list of questions that you want to ask. Recommend popping over to his Twitter and checking that out. I think it's a great starting point.
Okay. So this is an interesting question. Are synopses always going to be torture? Courtney?
The short answer is yes. Like synopsis are awful to do. But the big thing, I mean, they're always going to be hard because you're taking this entire book, this entire world that you have spent probably years working on and trying to shove it into 2 pages. Like that's a hard thing to do. So normally what I recommend to authors is to just get it down on the page. Just write out every plot point that comes to mind. If it needs to be 10 pages, let it be 10 pages, and then go back and start parsing out what are actually like the subplots that are going on and taking out what you can to get it down to that central plot line as best as you can. If you have CPs or critique partners, those are really good resources to help you because they have a little bit more distance from your book and can help you figure out whether or not you're actually focusing on the right things. And that's something that I do with my authors a lot is that I ask them to give me a synopsis because it's a lot easier sometimes to edit something down than to actually put it together. And so giving them that second eye of, okay, no, like this is what we need to focus on. Is very helpful. And also being okay with the fact that synopses are supposed to be boring. Like they don't have to be like your query that's supposed to hook anybody. They're literally just supposed to give plot points. So like, take a deep breath and it's okay. Like they don't have to hook anybody. They just have to give plot points.
All right. Michaela?
Yeah, same answer. Yes, they're so hard. I mean, it's really funny how like somehow compared to the synopsis, writing the book almost feels easy. It's like, this is an impossible task. But same advice as Courtney has. I mean, having someone else's eyes on it is great. You know, if you have like a CP or writerly minded people who actually haven't read your manuscript, sometimes that can be helpful, because then that person is going to be better able to point out like, whoa, I don't understand what's going on here. How do we get from here to here? Or I was really confused about this. Or, you know, it seems like this is a repeat of this other thing we saw. Like people who have a bit of distance can definitely be an asset to you when you're revising your synopsis. So a necessary evil.
All right. What would be your top advice for authors who want to query? Michaela?
Oh goodness, top advice. I mean, revise. You know, get the best possible point you can get it to. Have other eyes on it, like we were just talking about critique partners. You know, get feedback from other people before you start querying, so that your manuscript is in the best possible shape that you can get it. And then do your research. You know, really don't worry too much about diving into the querying process until you feel like you have your feet under you. You know, you've done your research of agencies, looked into where you might want to be represented, and then you know, take the time to tailor your query letters and all the rest. And be patient, I think, is my last piece.
Okay. Samantha?
Yeah, I was going to say persistence is key, which goes along with being patient. I mean, just keep trying. You don't know who is going to end up being the right match for you. And so just keep looking, keep querying. The other thing I like to tell authors is that this is like your one chance to really pitch yourself and pitch your project. So you shouldn't forget to highlight like what's wonderful about it, what you love about your book. I love when authors tell me that in their first paragraph, like, I love X about my book and I hope you love it too. That really gets me excited to read it.
All right. Courtney?
Yeah, definitely. Everything everybody else has already said. Definitely also make sure that you find your writing people, you know, find those couple people that you can talk to, that you can celebrate with unabashedly, and that you can also come crying to, because I'm sorry, you're gonna cry. It's gonna be hard, because so much of this industry is rejection, and that's just a hard thing for anybody to deal with. And so finding your people that you can go and be angry with and be upset with are important, because you need those people to support you and to support those other people. And oh my gosh, I totally just lost my train of thought. But also, you know, being neurodivergent, like I understand like how hard it is to, you know, kind of quiet those anxieties about where you're at in the process. But trying to keep your eyes like on your own paper is very important. It doesn't matter where anybody else is in the process. It doesn't matter if you have to shelve a manuscript and somebody else didn't. It doesn't matter if somebody else got an agent, you know, the first round of querying and you're on your 10th round of querying. It doesn't matter. It takes one yes, that's it. You can get 500 no's, and one yes is all you need. So just keep going. Like, you know, like the others said, persistence is the biggest thing.
All right. In our agent and writer relationship, what are the absolute no-nos for writers to do? Samantha?
I don't know that I've ever experienced any like no-nos. I think being flexible and open to feedback is definitely one of the things that I really appreciate in a client. I think like having a bad reaction initially to notes is never welcome, but maybe just taking the time, sit with it, think about what you want to say to your agent and how you want to respond, instead of like quickly flying off the handle is the way to go. I really haven't experienced a ton of red flags with my own clients. I guess I should say that agents are not therapists. And we have our own anxieties and we experience our own rejections, and we care a lot about your success and your manuscripts, and we love them deeply. And so I think it's okay to, tell your agent when you're anxious and tell your agent that you need support. But we can't necessarily always fix these problems for you and always make it go away.
All right, Samantha. Oh,
I think
she
Samantha
just
just
went.
yeah.
sorry, sorry, I forgot. Courtney.
Yeah, like Samantha said, I haven't really had any like big no-nos like come up at all. I mean, just being respectful of one another is really the biggest thing. And just making sure that while you want to make sure you stand up for yourself and you're not letting publishing house agent whoever make you a pushover, you also want to make sure that you're giving the other person enough respect and setting your own boundaries and respecting your agent's boundaries when it comes to certain things, and just making sure that you're acting professionally, because I think a lot of agents are pretty casual with their clients. Like, I message my clients all the time and we talk about stuff that's not publishing stuff, but also being aware of the fact that it is a business relationship. And so, making sure that when you are talking business and everything, that you are being professional and respectful with one another.
All right, Michaela.
I don't think I have anything to add. You guys covered it. I think the crucial piece is just mutual respect, and respecting professional boundaries when necessary or when appropriate, and having patience. Again, like when appropriate. Obviously, there are certain timelines and things that your agent needs to be following, but also like understanding that your agent is also a human being. So I think as long as the agent and client have a mutually respectful relationship, it should be a success.
All right. How should our writer handle rejection from an agent? Courtney.
I mean, with grace is the biggest thing, I think. Having Query Manager has prevented a lot of this, but when I was working with emails, I can't tell you how many emails I got back that were angry and very cruel and disrespectful. One of the very first queries I responded to as an intern, I got a very volatile and crude message back for just saying, sorry, this isn't a good fit for us. And so not reacting right away, at least on social media or toward that agent, is a big thing. You don't have to say thank you or anything like that. We don't expect that back. If you do want to respond, being respectful is very appreciated. And I mean, you're allowed to feel your emotions. You're allowed to feel upset and disappointed and even hurt. But again, that's something that you want to express with your tight-knit group of friends or the person that you use as support. You don't want to put that on social media, or definitely not emailing that agent back and telling them that they're a bad person or anything like that. So yeah, and then just keep moving forward after that.
All right, Michaela.
Totally agree with what Courtney said. I mean, just just take your time, and it's okay to be sad about it. There's no need to be rude about it though, and know that that's just one no, and that agent is seeing so many queries. The numbers game is pretty ridiculous, and so that just accepting that wasn't the right fit at that time, and moving on. There are so many other options out there. And also knowing, maybe a pass from one agent means that project wasn't right for them. Maybe a future project will be. So you never know. The door's never fully closed. So don't get discouraged. Just keep going.
Okay. Samantha?
Yeah, I totally agree. I would just say like a rejection is not personal. I know it can feel personal because you spend so much time pouring your heart and soul into a book. It's so many hours, days, months, years working on it. But it is more about that agent's individual tastes and less about your writing, your idea, your characters, or you as a person. It's not about that. And so I know that it can hurt, but I would let it roll off your back and don't take it personally and just keep at it.
All right. Do you have any resource, resources or reference to give to the viewers? Michaela?
Oh goodness, I don't think I have any off the top of my head. I would just say that, I mean, I think agencies tend to have pretty nice websites that a lot of times will link to resources that you can reference, guidelines, but also places that you can look for writing advice. I don't have any good ones off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I also would say, I mean, social media has its pluses and minuses, but I think there are some really great folks on there who, are talking about writing advice or writing community. So that can be somewhere a nice resource to find your people, find your group. And I'm sure the others hopefully will have some better options off the top of their head. That's an answer that I should have.
Samantha?
Someone actually asked me this question yesterday, so I feel a
You're
little
prepared.
I feel a little less off the cuff. So I would say my first and foremost favorite resource is Susan Dennard's website. Not only is she an author I admire and love, but she also has a huge section on her website for everything from how to write a book to how to look for an agent and how to query and everything, contracts, all of it. So that would be the place I would suggest you start. I love the Publishing Crawl blog. I've been following it since I was a teenager. I think there's so much great advice on there. And then Manuscript Wishlist, I think, is also a really good resource. I love Jessica Sinsheimer, and I think that the Manuscript Academy and their podcasts and all of that are great resources.
Courtney?
Yeah, one of my favorites is Query Tracker for authors to look at when you're researching agents. Authors can comment on the responses that they've got from that agent, how long it took, what kind of queries they're taking, whether it's through Query Manager or email or what have you. Patrick, the guy who designed it, is like really on top of adding clients and putting up whether or not agents are open or closed to queries, which I don't know how he does that, but he does. So that's a really good one. Writer's Digest is a really good one to look at. I think that at one point they had, help for creating queries and things like that. So those are good articles to look at. One that is not free, which sucks, is Publishers Marketplace is a good one if you're looking for deals. I know more agents, and I know that I've been trying to keep my sales on my website so that you can see them as well, because I don't want that cost factor to keep that information from anybody. But if you do have a Publishers Marketplace account, or you have a friend who does, who'd be willing to share it with you, that's a really good place to look at what agents have been selling, like what books at what point in time.
All right. We are at the end of this panel. Thank you all. So we're going to do a last one. If you have any last advice or comment to do, you can do it. Or else you can plug anything you want to plug. We will start with Michaela.
Well, I'll just say thanks so much for having me. This has been great fun. I hope that we have been helpful in some way to anybody watching. And, if you're interested in checking out more about my agency or myself, you can just go to dystel.com, dystel.com. And then I'm also very searchable with my first and last name on Twitter. And also, I think Manuscript Wishlist, like Samantha referenced, I have a page there that gets into a bit more detail about my favorite things and what I'm looking for. So looking forward to hearing from people.
Right, Courtney?
Yeah, definitely what Michaela said. I'm really happy to have been here and hopefully help somebody. My agency's website is just belcastroagency.com. I also have my own personal website, just firstandlastname.com, where I have a bit more information on what exactly I'm looking for on my wish list. Also have a manuscript wish list profile. And have my first client book coming out this fall in October. So City of Shattered Light by Claire Wynn from Flux. You guys want to pre-order. So sapphic YA sci-fi, if that's your thing. So yep, that's about it for me.
Yeah. And lastly, Samantha.
That's a good idea. I should plug a book coming out. My next book coming out is Zoomate Wanted by Corey Lear. It's a picture book. It's really funny, really cute, perfect for siblings. You should go pre-order it. In terms of finding me, I'm on the Thompson Literary website, and that info on there is a lot briefer than I have a Publishers Marketplace and a Manuscript Wishlist page, which both have everything the same on both of those pages. So if you don't have a Publishers Marketplace page, that's totally fine. But you can find me on there and on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. If you want to be part of the book community, that's a good place to start. And thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you all for watching this video. If you like, they will be there in the chat to answer any question. Other than that, happy Rahab, have a great day and a great life.